Hey, Doron, it's great to finally have you on the podcast. I mean, I think that we've been trying to get this thing going since like January at this point, right? Like it's
Yeah.
it's fully on my end. It's fully my fault. Like having it's crazy how having a kid, you think your schedule is going to be the same even just going up to it, right? Like um but doing it for the first time it's like, "Oh no, I have to go to the store, buy all this stuff. I have to put it all together, schedule a baby shower, like so much, so much like random stuff that you have to do. It's insane. And then you have the kid, and she completely ruins your schedule.
You can never be ready enough. That's what we say. Yeah, in Israel.
Yeah, I feel like I was told that too, right? Like, oh, you'll never be like ready enough. Um, but once you're a parent, you'll be ready. And I never really understood that until, I had the kid because I don't know what she needs. I don't know. I've never had to take care of a little human before, like I have guinea pigs for God's sakes, you know? But now it's like, tricked out, like my baby bag has everything in it. Like this little kid could survive off my baby bag for 3 days.
Yeah. I guess it's when it happens. I guess you are willing to do more than you thought. Yeah, as much as it's complex and new, you're just there and you're committed. So this is something that you understand once it happens. So this is what I see. I don't have a kid yet, but I see it around me, and it's very very clear that it just changes the way you prioritize stuff in your life, and give more meaningful stuff into your life. Yes.
Yeah, it's I don't know if I've shared this before on the podcast, but I mean I'm pretty open with my audience. Um, when I was young, I was in my teens, in high school, and I was trying to figure out, how I wanted my life to be, the kind of person I wanted to be. Um, and I just knew that whatever it was, whatever I was going to become, I had to be the best version of myself for my kids, because I didn't really have like a typical father, like I was in sports my entire life and he was never there and things like that, right? So it's extremely important to me, like way more important than other people probably, for me to be there, for me to provide not just a comfortable life, right? But like an extraordinary life, right? And for me when I had the kid, it was like, oh, this is what I've been working for, because I've had that vision literally since I was 18, you know? And now it's like, yeah, like this is what I did all of this for. Like this is why I made all those sacrifices in my 20s. So it kind of just it makes sense. And then it drives me a little bit farther, right? Because, I really want this podcast to be something. I really want this podcast to be the very best that it possibly can be, while still engaging with, experts like yourself on a more personal level. Like you're not going to get this on any other podcast, in my opinion, right? Like you might as well be thinking that me and you are at a bar having a conversation, right? Um, and so I want this to be something, not just for myself, but for my kid. Like it's going to help her in other ways, right?
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, I mean, I don't want to go down this rabbit hole, right? Like we got a lot to talk about.
No, but it's very classic, with people trying to fix, and I see myself also want to fix things that through my, friends and family and kids on your end, to fix some experience that weren't so good. So it's very natural and it's great.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, Duran, why don't we start with, how you got into IT, how you chose security, and we'll talk about maybe reverse engineering some malware and how in the
Oh,
world you got into it. Because like I consider it to be like a small hobby of mine, very small, but man, like you can go down so many rabbit holes with that. Like it's insane.
yeah, yeah. So I think all started. I always loved computer, and everyone played, games on the computer, and I was freaked about how people made this game, right? So there was when I was a kid, there was Doom and GTA 2. It was a great game. Then released WoW, but all I was doing is just finding a way to hack how to find a trainer or build a trainer or all these cracks. So I was actually doing that. So when I was 13, we are Jewish in Israel, so we had a bar mitzvah, and for the bar mitzvah you get a big, like a good present, or a big present, or a special one. So my father got me the finest computer ever. It was Pentium 4. It was with the maximum RAM you could have. It was very expensive. And after a week, I just burned all the computer, right? Totally. And what I did, I was trying to do overclock, trying to break some, hashes with the CPU, and try to do more with the CPU. And I was moving the cooling system and trying to replace some of the stuff. And I didn't use right this material that you put on the
paste, the thermal paste.
Yeah. And then everything like went. So I didn't have a computer after a week. I told my father, okay, how I'm gonna tell my father that I just it was worth like something like 4 or 5K.
Wow.
Computer. Like it was a really, really, really expensive one.
I mean, that's like extremely expensive for a computer right now, even. Yeah, like the computer that I built right now, I think it might have cost like, I don't know, 2,500, and I went all out.
Yeah, so I'm telling you, it was, it's including the screen and small other stuff, but yes, it was end to end like 4K. It was super, super, super expensive. And I just got to my dad and say, hey dad, listen, don't be mad or something, but the computer doesn't work. And I explained what happened, and I was sure that they're gonna say, hey, you don't have computer, this is your problem, like deal with it. Like, so I said, okay, I'm not gonna have a computer for a year, I'm gonna use the computer on the school, gonna stay longer. I had this vision already what I'm gonna do. But he told me everything is fine. Like, I was very shocked. He said everything is okay. He bought me another computer, which was like 500 maybe, dollars. Maybe something very, very cheap. And I used most of it. I learned all I knew till I was 18 with this computer. And I was doing a lot of other stuff. I had my servers. I was doing some, I don't know how to tell it because I don't want to be, accused after that. But I was doing a lot of stuff. I got passwords from people. I was doing a lot of, I was very curious about how things are working. How can I get to control other computer? How can I deceive people? It was like a game for me, but I learned a lot through this. I would say, journey. And I also learned a lot about the reverse engineering. I was reading about it. I was doing a lot. And one of the things that I did first was reverse engineer one of the DLLs, the dynamic libraries of Messenger, which you remember MSN Messenger?
Oh, yeah. That's like kind of where I started, honestly, with my experience with computers. Like, I didn't even have a computer for a little bit growing up. I'd have to go to the library, like, on the other side of town. So, like, it was a hike, and then I just spent the whole day there,
Yeah. So I think that this is something that built my confidence, that my father told me, I know you're gonna success with your passion. I'm not gonna be mad. Like, it cost and we didn't get the money back. we couldn't, that the insurance wasn't like covering that, and we tried. But he said that there is a room for mistakes, right? There is a room for learning, and this is something that I think it builds a lot of the way that I think, the way that I manage people, to know there is a range of mistakes that you can do, and if you're enough, aligned with where your heart and where your mouth, and you're really passionate about something, you will eventually gonna get it. So this is the education that I got from my home, and I think it's really helped me to build and make decisions in the future. So I just took this messenger and continue, and actually add another function, and then I released this messenger to to other people, and they used it, and then it was just like a game, but it was very nice to build it. One of the things that I did, I can share, that I was adding to my brother kind of a function that every time he sends something, he see what he sends, but I'm adding some strings on top of what he sends to the socket. So he sends like, yeah, everything cool, and then I add, yeah, everything cool, or just remove everything and just send something differently, like saying shut up or something, and then people were mad at him and he didn't understand why. So a lot of other kind of jokes between brothers. So yeah
it's you really, I feel like you talked about really like a shaping moment for you, that kind of took you down this path, right? Because like you mentioned, your dad could have been really mad and been like, okay, that's the end of that, and where would that have taken your passion? Maybe you wouldn't have dived into computers like that after that, like you would have done something else, rather than go down that rabbit hole like you did. And I feel like it's extremely valuable to understand, really, at any point, in your life, in your journey through life, is that you're gonna fail. You're gonna fail a whole lot, and you should, because by the time you succeed, you will have known, several other ways of how not to do it. Like I've killed my fair share of CPUs, and I don't make the same mistake twice, right? But I learn I learn new limits of my hardware. I learned the importance of thermal paste. I learned what happens when my water cooler dies and I don't realize it until it's burnt. Like it's
I think as a kid, I had to try it myself. Like if people told me, I had to try. It wasn't enough when I was a kid. Today I can learn from other mistakes easily and not trying to get into journeys. But when you're young, it's also important that you could make the mistakes yourself and also impact this retrospective inside and say, okay, so it's also important. Yes, it's wiser to learn from others, but sometimes it's necessary to do the mistakes by yourself.
Yeah, absolutely. So after that, I assume, since you're in Israel, that you went into the military. And I would also assume that that's probably where you learned about this thing called reverse engineering of malware.
Yeah. So it was, it's the best school in the world, people say.
Oh, yeah, I bet. I mean, I would assume it's a very like a natural progression even for you, right? Because you kind of already had that mindset, it sounds like, of trying to figure out, oh, how does this work? And like going backwards through it and figuring it out, the games and how Messenger works and all that sort of stuff, right? Is that how you saw it as well? Like it was a fit mentally for you?
It was a lot of things, this journey. I think that it started from curiosity. I think everything starts with passion and curiosity. And then for the military service, it's just many stars needs to be aligned, in the sky, that you will eventually go to somewhere you are very passionate about. I didn't know how much passionate I was about it before, till I got there. I think it's something that I just felt really blessed, truly, really blessed that I'm here. You know, you don't have any control when you get to military service, like in Israel. It's the military chooses you. You have almost no actually power and actually know where you're gonna be. Where they decided to put you. So yeah.
Like, can you talk about maybe what like, if there's any stats related to it, right? Like, let's say on any given year, there's 100,000 people that go into the military service. Of that, is like maybe 100, do they try out for 8200 group? And then of that, it's like,
I won't get to
wheedled
the
down even
stats
more.
and the numbers. I think it's I think that's not a good practice, but
Gotcha.
yeah. But it's something that was less popular than today, and maybe smaller. But I don't really know. Really, I don't have not to tell you. But I can tell you that in there you will find the best of the best of the people, really, and really the best school. And you can see it also in the industry that a lot of great companies, so Israeli companies, of course, coming to security space, and a lot of them are coming from 8200. And I think this is it's a combination of culture that you get from this space in terms of culture that you actually observe, and also the great skills that people. It's a team play. Security is a team play, and everything that you can do in a group can help you achieve more and learn more because you have more CPUs that can actually think together and learn more. I think this is
Huh. Can you, discuss any malware that you reverse engineered while you were there, and maybe one that
no,
was more challenging or whatnot?
no. But I can talk more about some of the time that I was in CyberArk and other startup that got acquired by CyberArk, that I was doing a lot of malware analysis in the market, let's say in the
Okay.
open market. And we discussed a little bit before about NotPetya and other kind of ransomwares that create a lot of noise outside. They were very simple in terms of technology, very simple, but they were very effective. So I think I don't know today how effective are security tools. Security tools. I'm saying malwares like NotPetya, but I see that they're still hot topic today and not being addressed fully today. Ransomwares.
So, let's talk about that a little bit. Which, I find it interesting because there's a lot of different technology out there, and it seems like whenever there's another ransomware outbreak that impacts a huge amount of people, the security industry starts marketing towards, oh, this wouldn't have happened if they were a customer of ours, right? Or this wouldn't have happened if, X, Y, and Z, right? And it's always related to how their product solves it. But then you always hear about these outbreaks. So if it was, take this pill, it's going to cure the situation, right? If it was truly that, then why, why isn't every company in the world required to have this product? It just doesn't make sense to me then, right? So how is it different? How is it evolving? Why is it so difficult to solve this problem, do you think?
First of all, every problem I can go very deeply into Windows internals and tell you why it's so hard to solve this problem. Because the ransomware can behave just like a human sometimes, but we can get to it. But I think that most of the companies have tools that can block or can alert in time, or have different kind of remediation strategies. but sometimes the problem is that the tool are not set correctly. So this is one of the biggest things that you see sometimes in breaches, that they had the right tooling, but they didn't, operate it right or misconfigured it. So this is one thing. The second thing with ransomware, that they really, on the kind of kernel, they read and they rename and they, just change the content and save. So right now you have a lot of other mitigations. You have mitigation in the user mode. You have mitigations at the kernel level. It depends. Someone offer, kind of prevention from the start. Some of them suggest backup. Just do a lot of backups and you will be fine. There are now more kind of solution into ransomware. When we started, I think around 2015, 16, when the trend just started, there weren't good solutions in that market. So today the market is much more mature, but again, the advantage is always on the attacker side. So they will find another kind of, API call or specific technique to just rewrite the content of the file. So it's always a struggle.
Huh. So that's interesting. Is ransomware very effective against Mac devices? Because, I ask this because I always hear about, ransomware on Windows devices, even on Linux, Unix devices. I never really hear about, Apple devices. Is it also effective on there, or is there some sort of architecture that is central to Apple that other manufacturers are not using that kind of protects it or insulates it better?
First of all, yeah, the knowledge and let's say the corporate kind of area till today, and even dominating today's Windows. So first of all, the knowledge there is the biggest in terms of internals and malwares, etc. So you have more malwares in Windows than Mac OS. Second of all, you have to take a look at the Microsoft operating system with a lot of a lot of dignity and a lot of respect, because they started with almost no kind of, the mindset of the operating system started and still supporting a lot of backward compatibility in that sense. So a lot of the issues that you see today that allows these malwares to run in Windows is usually because a lot of old kind of functions or the way of the architecture that actually how the operation system built, which is very different from Mac, which is very, I would say, modern approach of nothing can run besides what's signed by Apple, and everything is very much, secured with the fingerprint or anything else. So it's built such differently, and I think more modern and less complex than Windows. Windows is so complex, have so many protocols and things that lean on each other that comes from the early 2000s and still working till this day in the kernel, in user mode, etc. So this is also the reason why Windows is more, let's say, easy target. And in Linux and others, you can run, any type of, I would say, ransomware also very easily, but the data is not sitting on servers mostly. So they are less being attacked. So, data is sitting on SharePoint or specific workstation, but usually Linux is just, running specific service, and that's it. So usually it's not a big crisis if you are just encrypting some of those files.
Yeah, you bring up a really good point. I can't remember what I was actually working on, but I remember, I was trying to mitigate something with SMB, right? Or an older version of SMB. And in testing it, I found out that like, oh, there's other like critical parts of Windows that uses this outdated version of SMB that makes my device vulnerable to a wide range of attacks. And like I tried to disable it. I tried to, figure out how I could like still use the other critical parts of the computer because it like barely functioned after that. And like I couldn't do it, like I had to mitigate it another way. I think I had to put like, a control around it or something like that, or enforce authentication because I couldn't just disable this vulnerable service, which is, it's a pain, from a security professional. Yeah. For a security professional, it's a pain, like, it doesn't make any sense for it to work like that.
Something, right? What was the name of vulnerability? It was like blue, right? What was that? It has this name. Can't remember right now, but it was like using, like you said, old version of SMB. You could actually close it by changing specific registry keys, and then reset the operation system, and then it wouldn't start these services. I remember it's like protocols are 445, like ports 445 and 139, if I remember correctly. A long time I didn't look at it. But interesting, yes. So yes, it's just, Windows is so complex. I think one of the best guys that I met that actually knows everything almost about Windows is Alex UNESCO. I don't know if you heard his name before.
No.
He's I don't know about his status now, but he's a very technical guy, smart guy, and he came to Israel a few times also to help CyberArk when I was at CyberArk, we asked him to come, not just for the conference that we had in Israel, but also for training the people to learn how he debugs, how he uses to research and learn the problems around kernel and other components in Windows. And he basically reversed all the major components, even the oldest ones. So sometimes Microsoft themselves were actually consulting with Alex, which never, he didn't write those, but he reversed those. So he knew more than their people actually how to mitigate or how to solve some of the problems they have. So I think that Windows eventually, they're going through the hypervisor. I don't know if you're familiar with that, but it's actually like an abstraction between the operation system and eventually the kernel, etc. I think that this will solve most of the problem, and they already solved, but eventually, I guess that Windows will have to come with a new, branded like operation system. Maybe this will be the answer to compete with the protected, much more protected version of operation system by Mac. And I think that Mac is now controlling more and more of the market. And I think that if you could see this, I saw some report now talking about Microsoft, AWS, and Google, right? They're the big vendors today. They're playing, and it's very focused on the cloud. And you see that the revenue from selling at least, this kind of, I guess most of the revenue goes to services now, like, cloud services, etc., and less than licensing or specific computers. Maybe everything will be. I think that in the future will have like, you won't have a single device that you could use. You could use like any device and log into the device, and it will be, you will have everything that you need in that device, because everything will be not coupled to a specific device.
Yeah, that's
a lot of
really
thoughts.
Interesting. Like if you potentially like buy a laptop or something and it just runs off of a hypervisor in the cloud, and base everything off of that. Like it's crazy how the cloud is transforming and evolving, right? Because, I was talking to Walmart maybe a year ago, and the cloud security director told me that their only way of measuring how much of their infrastructure is in Azure was by actually calculating how much of Azure's overall infrastructure they use. So Microsoft gives them a report of how much of their infrastructure Walmart actually uses, and it's an astronomical number. It's above 40%. I couldn't believe it. I actually told them, like, you have to prove that to me. Like, that's unbelievable.
Wow. Wow. This is a huge number.
Yeah.
Wow.
So, can we talk about NotPetya a little bit, and maybe what you did on NotPetya, why it was so destructive, and what the solution to it was?
Yeah, so if I remember correctly, it was with this SMB vulnerability, right? It was able to, move laterally and infect more and more servers. So if you got a control over one, you had more and more, kind of attack surface. So I think one that, Microsoft and all the other services were, it was a 0 day almost. Or maybe it was a 1 day that was used very, very fast, so people didn't patch their systems. I think this is something that we see more, that 0 days are strong, of course. You never know about 0 days, but 1 days became really, people are know and aware of, getting the maximum potential of 1 day, because on day one, it's like 0 day.
Oh.
On day one, and after that it gets, of course, patched. But I guess that this is something that we saw there, and what we did in CyberArk that I can share, we built kind of an lab, right? And in that lab, we downloaded more than, I guess, between 5 or 10K samples, different SHA-1s. Everyone compiled it differently with different key, with different, obfuscation, with different kind of protection. And we've seen eventually what is the same kind of family. And we ran all of them against some solution that we had back in the time. And we just make our kind of protection better and better every time. And I think this is something that we did back then. We already have the environment, but it allowed us to just face thousands of samples every day and learn from how attackers actually generate their own samples. And what we used to do is two things to get more samples. One, VirusTotal.
Yeah, of course.
So VirusTotal is a great kind of scanning tool that gives you a quick answer about specific sample, if it's malicious or not, and what is the family. But it's also a great database. Think about it, because everyone uploads something there, you can just get the metadata and learn from it. So based on that, we also found a lot of other malwares that been uploaded there. And also we connected to the darknet. And also myself, I was looking into people that selling specific packages of malwares. So this is something that you saw that NotPetya was so popular back then, and it was people used the samples of NotPetya with this vulnerability that they got exploited. And it got into the wild. So you didn't have one operator, for NotPetya, but you got thousands, or I don't know how many, of potential operators that use the same kind of sample eventually.
Huh. So was this when you were at CyberArk, or was there another company that you
NotPetya was
were at?
around 2017 or 18. This is something like that. So yes, I was at CyberArk back in the time. We had a great research group. Still there. Great people are still there, and do a good job around ransomware. CyberArk has a great product that protects the endpoint against these threats. Of course, there is no 100%, never, but I guess they keep doing this mechanism of always downloading more samples and try it automatically against the solution.
Oh, so can we talk a little bit about what it's like to work for a company, as big as CyberArk in the cybersecurity industry? I feel like, for me, and I'm learning this now because I'm at a very large enterprise, it's it's difficult to enact change. It's like extremely difficult to enact change, and
Yeah.
who you report to matters more than like anything else, really. Is that
Hmm.
something that you experienced at CyberArk as well?
Yeah, definitely. My journey to CyberArk wasn't, I would say, normal. I got as part of acquisition. So I was in a startup company that got acquired by CyberArk. So one thing that I kept working with my CEO back in the days, and he was my manager for a long time. So it's the one thing that is most important. When you get to anywhere, basically also in a new company or a big company, is your manager. So I had the same manager, so it was easier for me in terms of getting into a new corporate. So I didn't feel this kind of friction. Um, and also something that we did back in the days was that we had independence within CyberArk. So we had our own computers or network on. We called the CyberArk Labs.
Huh.
So back in these days, I didn't feel so hard for me. Wasn't so hard for me to get things done because we were very agile, very small, and we had a great autonomy. And very quickly, I came from a team leader to a group manager and several teams, and we flew a lot, flew a lot to a lot of areas in conferences in the US, in England, in Singapore. We talked at Black Hat. We had great findings, and we found 0 days. We reported to Microsoft, to Nvidia, to all of the big ones. It was a real fun. It was a real fun because all the focus that we had was to create new features to existing products, create PR, a lot of PR, how we are advanced, what the team can do, and also innovation. So all these vectors were really paradise for researchers.
Yeah, I remember during that time frame, hearing about like CyberArk's top tier team over there, of their research team and the engineering team, and just how their product and their I I guess their product and their company was just so much better than the competition. But yeah, like I remember during that time frame always just hearing about like CrowdStrike, CyberArk, even a little bit of Carbon Black still at the time, of just having these research teams that were just paramount to the industry as a whole. It's really interesting. Did you ever have that perspective of like, what I'm researching right now could be impacting tens of thousands of other companies, and it could, truly impact how this entire market goes?
Mm-hmm. Oh, for sure. I think the company, of course, wants the prestige out of the exclusive knowledge and etc. And it says a lot about the company when they have a top-notch researchers that find more, and people are it creates trust, and trust is a lot in the cybersecurity space. So I think this is something. But for the researcher, his goal is much different. He wants to, like you said, make an impact, that people will acknowledge his success, So this is the main driver for researchers is again the passion and the way to say, hey, I found something that is really impactful. And this is something that was the North Star for most of the researchers. And they did it. They truly did it. They found vulnerabilities in the Active Directory, which again is every company with Microsoft actually working with the Active Directory. And once you get to vulnerability in Active Directory, you can get to all the environment. So it's great to see how much value it also brought to the world. Actually.
Yeah, anything involving Active Directory and a vulnerability is just such a headache. Oh my god, it's such a headache because it touches everything. It's like it's not something that you can put off. It's like, no, drop what you're doing right now. You need to address this.
Exactly, and it takes time, and you cannot shut a company, from working. And this is something that will change eventually. Active Directory moved to the cloud. Now it's Azure Active Directory, and people are trying to do that. But eventually, there will be more. I know Microsoft is working on new approaches, how to be centralized but not centralized. So how to manage identities. This is something that a lot of companies are working towards, just replacing this, huge centralized safe that eventually, if it's been, accessed or hacked, you just clueless. And this approach, they cannot be maintained anymore. And also based on the blockchain technology that moved and became more popular than ever, I think this is something that a lot of companies now looking to change the way how and the architecture of things. Always when I talk about approaches of security, I always talk about the ARP protocol. You familiar with this protocol?
I am, but not as familiar as you.
Yeah. So the story about ARP is that there is a lot of attacks on top of it, and it's also very basic in terms of the architecture of the 7 layers or whatever you call it. Some they call it 5, 7, but eventually it's layer 2, and it's very naive. So it says always, to everyone, this is my Mac, this is who I am, this is who I saw. It's very, very naive. So it's also very, very easy to exploit based on that, because you can, mimic some of other or just lie to the network. And I think this is something that I saw in cybersecurity even today, but mostly in the beginning, that you just exploit naive people that wanted to build a product that do something, but never thought about the malicious kind of use cases. Today, it's more into the, it's more it's something that is a topic when you develop now a product, but not always. And logic stuff or behavior could be very easy to exploit even today.
Yeah, that's. I feel like we go down a whole rabbit hole there for another hour. Yeah. But we haven't even talked about DevOcean. So what is DevOcean? What do they focus on? What do you focus on?
And it's us. Yeah, now it's us.
Yeah.
Yeah, DevOcean. I took a year off after CyberArk. COVID started, and I wanted to, to think. So I just stayed at home at least 6 months. I was traveling a little bit, but I just, took a time off, a real time off. And eventually I went to Greece and I went to Dubai and I learned chess. Really, I played with people around the globe. It was a great, great thing to be focused on something else entirely. And eventually, I got bored and I started to think what I'm going to do next. It was already 6 months or more what I'm going to do. So I started talking to a lot of peers and, people that I knew back in the time when I worked at CyberArk and other security teams and friends. And I started getting a picture of problems that people have, right? I didn't try to, but it happens. And eventually I was having this table of a lot of ideas of problems that you can solve and how much they're real, how much they're wide, etc. And in that time, cloud was already, a year and a half ago. There was cloud. Security tools were already there, finding thousands of events, every week. And you got more and more and more tools in that ecosystem that was really, positive in the market. So everyone was getting more tools and more tools, and it was like a jungle. And people just told me, "Hey, I don't need another security tool. Don't build another security tool." Okay. And eventually I understood that we're not going to build another tool that's going to find more problems, but in the cloud space mostly, yes? Because visibility is not the problem anymore, or kind of being solved. Today, the problem is that they need something that helps them to fix those problems. And then we studied it, and we started to go with DevOcean. Very shortly we talked to people, and they were connected to VCs. So without even trying to raise money actively, the process just started because these people, talk to VCs, and the VCs talk to us. And all of a sudden we were into fundraising. I talked to my friends and they joined. And today we help security teams to, fix vulnerabilities much faster in cloud native apps, which one of the main problem there, when you find a lot of problems in the cloud, is to understand who's going to help you fix those problems. We understood this is like the main gap, because security is responsible for security. But when it comes to the cloud and cloud native applications, they cannot do anything about, fixing the problem. They have to talk to, their IT developer or the DevOps or a specific engineer that's actually responsible for that. And this gap was the first gap that we identified. Okay, there is a gap to understand who can fix it. But it didn't end there. Also, where to fix it, what is the fix? All those questions that you do all the time in order to, understand, okay, is it important or not? Okay, it's important. Why? To get the context. Okay, then finding the right people. So all of this journey of remediation is so long and is so fragmented. And not only because of the process itself, but because of the different tooling that you have that's being used by different personas. You have tools that sitting in the CI/CD. You have tools that sit in the cloud. You have tools that sit in the WAF, on the API level, on the Kubernetes level, on the code level. So you have so many when it comes to cloud native apps that is almost impossible to manage, and there is no SIEM or SOC that built for the cloud. Cloud is very different. You don't have IP for a machine. It's very, very different, and the mitigation is always through eventually developer. So we said, okay, we're going to help security teams to close the gap between security, operation, and developers, and help, let's say, drive remediation much faster. So this is our story. This is the storm starts. Yeah.
Oh yeah, just in time, right? That's that's extremely true. I thought going into cloud security, like, oh yeah, I'm going to be working in the cloud and fixing all these different problems, and I'm going to be, extremely knowledgeable. I'm knowledgeable, but I work with so many other teams. I mean, my role touches basically the entire organization in some way, and it's crazy just trying to figure out who owns what and identifying that and talking to them at a level that they can retain the information and do something with it. It's a struggle. It really is. Especially going into a new environment. I'm sorry. What were you saying?
Yeah. No, it's just, and you talk just about the process, not about the gap in knowledge or just the process between people to people, how it's actually being managed, because it's really fragmented.
Yeah, and it's different for everyone. I'm finding that how we approach a vulnerability with infrastructure, it could be the exact same vulnerability, but how we address it with developers is different. And then how we address it with the business unit is different again. And how even how I talk to them, how I frame the email, right? Like it has to be different each time. And it's an interesting challenge that you you don't think about when you're going into cloud security. You know, you think that you're going to be doing stuff that you would do on prem in the cloud, and you're, you know, configuring tools and all this sort of stuff. It's like, yeah, I need to know how to do that, but it's a lot more collaboration. And if people don't want to work with you, you're not going to be successful.
Yeah, this is something that also we understood, that, you know, developers and engineers are here to release features. They don't want to do security stuff. You know, people are coming with tickets and demands and trying to explain why they need to do it. But product usually wins, you know, and some of the security needs, even if you prioritize them, sometimes they won't gonna happen because they have other priorities. So this is one of the problems. Also managing all of it, you know, because you open so many requests to a lot of people. So how do you manage and make sure it's actually being solved? So all of these, you know, remediation lifecycle, end to end, from finding to solving, this is what we do. We understand the problem in the process, which is very different, again, from different organizations. But eventually we understood you cannot teach companies how to solve the problem because they solve the problem today. The main goal is to make them do more of what they do today with the existing, let's say, existing workflows that developers are using. So if they're using Slack or Jira or GitHub, how they work, it's much more easier to work like that. And then developers should feel like they have a champion in their team, like a, you know, like a security champion in their dev team. It actually helped them to prioritize and help them to understand what is the fix, instead of, you know, security coming from outside and trying to tell them, hey, you should do this is the list, and this is the SLA. So this is what we are trying to change in terms of the perspective of how security evolves and the role into the development of cloud native apps.
Huh. Yeah, that's extremely interesting because, you know, I was hired on at this one company, and I was kind of that security liaison, I guess, you know, for other teams, other parts of the org. But it took me quite a long time to gain the respect and trust of the security team, because they're like, oh, you report up through someone else. We're used to these kind of people at this, you know, level. That's where they're at. And I'm like, no, like I'm a security person. Like we speak the same language, you know, and once I was able to bridge that gap and gain their trust, it was a much different conversation. I was able to accomplish a whole lot more, make a lot more, I guess, cultural change within the security team, because the rest of the org viewed security very negatively, you know, very poorly. And I was able to help kind of change that culture, I guess. But it was really interesting, right? Because it was like I had to be in a role that was outside of security, but I had to be a security person, you know, like security would not deal with someone that wasn't a security person.
Mm-hmm.
Is that what you've seen as well at other organizations that have integrated your technology into their environment? It kind of alleviates that gap.
I think this is what we talk about is something that you see a lot, is the pride of security teams. That I think what makes them special is one, critical kind of thinking, you know, trying to ask the right questions or any question at all times. There is no really, you know, rules can be broken, etc. So this is like a lot of that, and there is a pride in security that if you're not security, maybe you don't understand enough. So you see this. I guess I see this less and less today, because now DevOps becomes the the topic that everyone wants to, you know. First of all, there is a real gap there in terms of knowledge, and people are looking for DevOps. This is what I see, and these are also kind of mixture between real IT, the modern IT to security. And I think this is like the people that bring security to a lot of the aspects in the cloud. So it's interesting. Is what I
Huh.
see. But I definitely can feel what you just described, because security teams are kind of people. It's they have their own pride, and I think they knowledgeable, and sometimes they even think that they are more knowing more than others. Yes, definitely.
Right. Yeah. It always creates a interesting dynamic. Well, we're coming up on our time now, and I'm trying to be very conscious, of the time limit that I gave you. Um, so why don't we, end by, telling my audience where they can find you, where they can find DevOcean, and if they wanted to reach out, what's the best way to do that?
Yeah. So first of all, they can reach out through the website, devotion.security. Um, and we have now 3 days trial. They can use the product free and see how we can help them cut the backlog in the attack surface. So be my guest to get more kind of a 30 days free trial. And we also gonna be at the RSA in San Francisco in 2 weeks from now or something like that, on the 24th of April. So meet us there.
Awesome. Well, Doron, I really appreciate you coming on. I really enjoyed our conversation. It's been very fascinating and very interesting to me. But yeah, I really appreciate it, and I hope everyone enjoyed this episode.
Same, Joe. Thank you very much for the time and this honor to be here. Really.
Absolutely.